Welcome back to the Futurist New Deal. I am here with Jason Mallory, economist of the kind of economist who I like to talk to, a guy who's got a lot of insights into the world of tech. As you know, here on the Futurist New Deal, we are an economic policy platform. We have a lot of reforms of this kind, and we like to get insights from thinkers who have who might be able to add more to that conversation. You know, we spent a lot of time working on the Futurist New Deal materials in the form of our ebook and an awful lot of other interviews, but no conversation is ever complete, and we need to continue to always be elevating those discussions. And I believe that no one could elevate that discussion more than Jason Mallory. Hi, Jason. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Here in my vehicle in Silicon Valley currently.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you're a talented man. You're looking well, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, had a nice swim earlier.
Nice. We had some wind blowing. A bit yesterday in Arizona. How's the weather in California?
The Central Valley's hot, but Silicon Valley is 10 degrees cooler. I would say that. It's sunny and beautiful. So I'm considering a congressional run in one of two different districts currently, based on the economic policy that we were to discuss.
Yes, this is true. I should say that I am somewhat of a neophyte to running for political office. You, sir, are not. Tell us a little bit more about your race.
Well, I'm not official yet, and considering this, essentially attempting to responsibly assimilate automation into the workforce, which, as we are kind of divided as a country right now between not addressing the issue at all or honestly policies that are more revolutionary than evolutionary, so as to not have such of a tough road. What I'm suggesting is something that would be able to grow proportionate to the use of automation in place of people, and not just providing a here's some money, now you don't have a say in what work's getting done in the world anymore, but rather the ability to have the citizenry have a vote for what their share of the workforce is or is not doing it in the workplace, so that we don't have a for-profit motive taking the country and society in a direction that we're not necessarily in favor of as populace. So it's not just a distribution of wealth, but it's a distribution of the means of production. And that's accomplished through the first step being forming the Department of Automated Labor, where we're to take all automated labor and classify it, similar to like how the FDA might classify different drugs. These are approved, right? So to be able to determine what is street legal for a robot, that's where this would occur, as well as what the labor rate per hour for that means of production, that automated labor, what is that? So it's not you need to come up with millions of dollars as a startup in order to be competitive with automated labor. Instead, there's an hourly rate that levels the playing field and enables the small business to access that type of labor, be competitive, and build a middle class out of it in a capitalist system. And the actual policy, what I'd like to see as law, which I wrote a science fiction book in 2012, was nominated for Congress in 2014, based solely on the policy is that every citizen would have the right to one equal share of the automated labor force, and for what it does or does not do, and fair share of what it produces as a whole.
And sorry, this is incredibly important stuff, and it is, as you said, issues that are not being addressed in the smartest way. And sometimes calls for the more extreme action or inaction that's kind of tangential. Last night I interviewed a Green Party presidential candidate. I won't get into that too much, but what came up was that I'm in the Transhumanist Party. He was in the Green Party. But we're kind of forced to frame this in the language of other candidates from other parties, which kind of makes us wince a little bit. But let's talk about some of these candidates now in Silicon Valley. What you're describing, a dividend of this kind that is specific to AI and automation. It's not as unpopular as people might think. These unicorns and big operators in this community, they recognize the effect that they're having on the economy, the effect that they'll have on the workforce in the future, and they're willing to make these kinds of concessions. There's an awful lot of support in San Francisco in these communities for someone like Andrew Yang. How do you see that coming together?
Yeah, I think that Bill Gates, Elon Musk, these types of tech leaders are for some type of addressing of automation replacing people at jobs and maintaining a consumer cycle. So while I'm in the Yang Gang, I have helped form a couple of debate parties for Andrew Yang. I think that I applaud the fact that he's taken automation from a non-issue to a national conversation.
Very much so.
That's a very big accomplishment. What I see with the freedom dividend from Andrew Yang is addressing the demand side of the economy, but in no way does it really address the supply side. So it's a distribution of wealth, but it's not a distribution of access to the means of production. So it creates a large welfare class, but it doesn't necessarily provide the tool to be able to move forward. Nor does it support a higher technology growth rate as we may have through stimulating the ability to make startups that can be successful by having the means to the automated production. That's one of the value additions that I see from my system being what I think better. And I'd love to debate him on the issue.
Yes. Well, I got in trouble at the debate. We had a debate a few days ago. That is our last party debate with the Transhumanist Party, and I got there was a little bit of a gotcha moment in that debate where because I had said in some threads, not in press, but in some threads that I was a Yang supporter, and perhaps the wording of that was a little too strong for the party documents that I signed off in. So I was sweating there for a second, but yeah, I do admire Andrew Yang. I'm kind of like you. I would like to set something up with that camp in the coming days, or just stay abreast of what's going on.
Yeah. I think I can help connect you with some people in that camp that can maybe make that occur. I think that he's been able to accomplish a whole lot, and he's turned a non-issue into an issue, which now Silicon Valley is going to need to address as the nation says, hey, Silicon Valley, you guys are causing automation. But if you look at Andrew's plan, if it's on budget, he needs at least 1.8 trillion. So even if he taxed all of the $20 billion in profit from Amazon, it's not, it's 20 billion, 1,800 billion, right?
Yeah.
So
and
that's not exactly solving the issue. Go ahead.
My competitor has run into some of this fuzzy math as well with funding, and because two of the three platforms in my race are UBIs. Mine is a federal land dividend, which is leasing these 85% of the federal lands, not the parks, to carbon neutral companies, and using this rather large revenue from that, about $173 trillion over 10 years by our estimations, to fund. That would be more than enough to fund this $52,000 a year UBI. So we're excited about that. But there's still more work to be done with figuring out some of those things. And certainly, a lot of the work is positioning yourself in such a way that you are not immediately dismissed by the fiscal conservatives who basically constitute the entire power base in federal government in two-party system.
Yeah, I am a conservative, and I also believe that conservation is the conservative position in regards to not just saving money, but saving the environment. I think that, whether how that translates through the two predominant parties is up for interpretation. But yeah, as far as having conservative values that are sustainable, right? That's what we're looking for, both economically and environmentally. I like that you're placing a moral foundation, I guess, on carbon neutral. I actually also I recently became the patent filing date, essentially, business method of making a vacuum tube train. So like two tubes, like hyperloop, where the two tubes stacked on each other from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean along our southern border. So basically getting Trump his wall, but not a big, expensive, stupid wall that makes us have bad relations with our neighbor. Instead, it's a wall that is a shipping route that benefits both countries involved and would be able to move a shipping container easily at more than 500 miles an hour, more than 5,000 if you put it as a maglev train, less energy than it would cost for an electric vehicle. And it takes out the entire carbon footprint of the trucking, the trains, or having to have the cargo ships go down through the Panama Canal or other ways around. It would be massively good for the environment, as well as being able to have same-day shipping from Amazon for like Texas barbecue in Los Angeles.
This is why we need policymakers like yourself. Oh, finger in the face there. who have the language of automation, who have the language of a more 21st century fully fledged technocracy, or even ultimately algocracy. I like this notion a lot. And you have that, and as a result, you're able to come up with a policy implementations that are not something out of the 13th century, or Genghis Khan or something. So this is an incredible idea, and it was something one of the things that really kind of turned me on to what you're doing. Tell us more about this initiative.
Well, essentially, it's an idea that the Citizens Climate Lobby seems to be in favor of, which is 130,000 people nationwide, as well as the Elders Climate Action. And it is the ability to have rather than pushing through the air, making a tube and using the air to push or pull shipping containers, trains, whatever else through the tube. So you're not fighting the atmosphere. So you can move things in a far more energy efficient way. So if we do this from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, we can get around a huge amount of burning of fossil fuels while also providing Texas, which is a foothold in the fossil fuel industry, a shipping route. So they're still making money. Plus, they get to have a very active port and the ability to have a gas station for international cargo. So they're still able to sell a lot of their product, and as the world is somewhat transitioning out of fossil fuel as combustion engines, they'll have another industry that's going to provide money for Texas. So I see it as something that's possible. I think with the push for the wall, the southern border wall, Republicans would actually vote yes. So there's in regards to green infrastructure. So it's something that can move forward in a bipartisan fashion. In regards to having something that's climate friendly through Democrats, but that's the wall for Republicans. It's both. And it makes everything work not only carbon neutral, but better. It's faster than putting something on a plane or driving a truck across the country.
Yeah, it kind of echoes to what we did with the Futurist New Deal, just in the way it's implemented, in what you're describing about that bipartisan approach. I won't say too much, but the Futurists, I come from camps where the idea of raising the marginal tax rate is more popular. I kind of decided not to pursue that kind of tax reform in this platform, but instead to pursue something that would be building a big tent and also be of interest to people across the political spectrum among these techno-futurists. And I think that that is doubly true of what you're doing with this initiative. And we should say again, this is an infrastructure project. This is not a money pit like spending many trillions of dollars on a piece of medieval technology like this border wall. And let's not kid ourselves. Donald Trump is a mafioso. Half of that money, a third of that money, is going to go to his mafia buddies.
This would, at least there would be money to speak of, because we would be generating money with every shipment going across it. So as Andrew Yang says, precisely. Amazon's not paying anything in taxes. If you get one-day shipping from Amazon because it's better than sending it on a jet, it's cheaper and faster, then they're going to pay for that shipping route, just like we pay for a bridge toll to go over a bridge, and that's what can pay for the construction of it, rather than being stuck in bipartisan gridlock. So there is a way of making all parties happy there, and it's through new technology.
Yes, and this has been the story of technocracy. Somehow it's an ugly word in the West and in the United States. But this level of bringing engineering principles to other institutions and this set of ideas that's encompassed in the modern notions around technocracy. This has never been a bad thing for organizations. This has never been a bad thing, and just having a value added in everything that you do, having an infrastructure that is multi-purpose, having something that isn't just a money pit, but that actually enhances the economy and brings something new to the table and sets the stage for further advances along these lines. It's what every person should be doing in the world of public policy, instead of what they're doing, which is just a lot of preening and posturing.
Yeah, I mean, what do they call it? Political pageantry shouldn't be taking up the place of logic and reason. So yeah, I definitely support efforts that are tangible, not just loud. So in regards to another major tech that's developing, which if I'm to run it in Silicon Valley, it'll either be as a Democrat in the primaries against Anna Eshoo, or as a Republican against her. So Anna Eshoo is in committees in regards to microbiological developments. As a techropreneur / politician, what would you say are some of the intelligent designs for the development of those industries?
Oh well, there's an awful lot that we can be doing. You're talking about the life sciences. Are you talking about tech more broadly?
I'm talking about Genentech. I'm talking about CRISPR. I'm talking about the ability to evolve in a single generation rather than multi-generational, and preserving the ability to evolve correctly.
Well, I was having this conversation with Gennady last night, and our mutual friend, and we were talking about life extension and our passion for it, and policies to this end. And my feeling is that the best thing that we can be doing in these fields in the largest sense is to be allowing big data in biomedicine to be forging as many public-private partnerships as possible toward the end of elevating what public health services that we have to something that is more prevention-based and more in the way of constant oversight. A lot of people are starting to get iWatches and things that are doing some of this, but it should be integrated into public health services because ultimately, like your concerns about the economics of this, it costs pennies on the dollar to maintain prevention rather than end stage concerns, cure. That's that, and there's so many network effects that derive from using big data and automation in this context. So to me, that's kind of in a list of what interesting things that are happening or should be happening in the life sciences. That's a long list and many great things, but like the top three are things around that public health service being fully automated and incorporating more advanced algorithms and just having that data being used in a better way and instead of just being sort of siloed in the private sector.
Do you think that, for example, if everyone who crossed into the United States was required to do a finger prick of blood droplet to be able to acquire some of that data, is that something that you would be for or against?
That's an interesting question. We know that border security is a hot button issue, and there are a lot of things that along these lines, some things along these lines already happening. I don't consider privacy rights to be the thing that gets me up in the morning compared to harm reduction or other concerns of these kinds with building better systems. So I am generally in favor of that sort of thing, but we don't want to be painted as the architects of some dystopian nightmare. But if such a thing were to be done in a responsible way, then that could be a great asset to the kind of operation that I would be describing. And there are going to be an awful lot of things where people are going to be opting in to some service, and it might not be a kind of a service that was the thing that they imagined that they would be participating in their entire life. But as these things become available, a lot of these things tend to have a retroactive business model. So for our users who are just casually interested in this stuff and want to be at the vanguard, you want to be the person who's saying, yeah, I volunteer to participate in this. And I would kind of put those people in that sort of class. I think that I would encourage them to do it, but there's definitely an awful lot of balls in the air with that.
Yeah, there are a million unanswered questions. And it's the type of thing where, as the tech is developing faster than regulation can keep up with, and faster than it's kind of a wild west. Where we're currently at a bottleneck, where Congress is at a bottleneck right now, is determining who owns the data, like your own medical data. Because currently, the way things are worded, whoever collects the data owns the data. And to be able to give up whatever data you have on someone identifies your special sauce, what you've been able to collect. So that's the bottleneck. So we're not able to say that's a public resource for big data in medicine. A tangible way around that would be for like county clinics, things like that, to actually just own an MRI machine. And rather than having to ask, hey, socialized healthcare that really just said you're required to take insurance when you break the law and we'll tax it on that socialized healthcare through Obamacare, right? Rather than just leaving the data outside of the public resource, if we purchase as the government MRI machines and can do an MRI scan, can do a finger prick, then anyone who is in Medicare, Medi-Cal, those types of things would be able to do so, and we'd be able to build that big data pretty quickly, regardless of having to pay off different medical providers for what they can contribute, as that's the current battle. And I see it as something that's directly a direct assault on health and well-being of the American citizenry, and becomes more of a constitutional issue than a lawyer issue. That's the way I see it. But as far as how that translates, I'm not really sure how that goes. But yeah, I think the ability to access your own medical records, maybe one holiday, everybody will do this and then submit them into a government database to be able to have it anonymized and be able to have legitimate predictive measures through AI on, we can see this, and we've seen 10 million of them now, so we know what you should do. Surgery and things like that.
A couple of days ago, oh, sorry, go ahead. A couple of days ago, I spoke to Florian Marcus. I'm sorry. There's a little echo on the line. I'm not trying to be rude. Please continue your thought.
Yeah, we have a bit of a latency. But yeah, so the healthcare industry is 1/5 of the U.S. economy. $1 in $5 is done through healthcare. That's about the same as real estate, or close to it. So consider it that way. I personally don't believe it to be moral to trade economy out of this health, and I don't support doing so. And I do support curative measures and to have people be functional as a part of a contributing to the economy, rather than profiting off the backs of the brute.
Yes, it relates directly to what I was going to say. I spoke to the Estonian e-governance emissary, Florian Marcus. We did a talk of this kind a few days ago, and they have different laws in the EU and in his country particularly about the kind of things that you were just speaking of, corporations owning that data. There's an awful lot of thinkers in the United States, some of whom people might be surprised that they would hold this idea that that individuals should be the ones who own that health data, irrespective of how it's being used. It has, but we talked about the trade-offs. He mentioned, that he supports the way that his country does it, but there's some trade-offs there, and there's trade-offs in converting to a national health service as well. There's kinds of research that's going on and companies that are doing good work that might be negatively affected by that sort of thing. What do you think is the path? I think of it like the gun debate, which has ratcheted up in recent days. I don't care that much about guns. People think they're sexy. People think they're not sexy. I care about the harm reduction. There's 35,000 people dying. We need to get that number down to a tiny number. How do we do that with respect to a public health service? What is your feeling?
I think having a public resource for things like the Da Vinci robotic surgeon, which can at some point become automated, as well as customers/patients being able to request medical records such as arthroscopy video, those types of things should be part of the deal as providing as a licensed healthcare provider. You should be able to provide what you did on the patient to the patient. That's happened for me one time, and it was through a U.S. ski team doctor. Other healthcare said no. You're not going to. You don't get the information. If we cut something of your body out of your body, we keep it. You don't ever see it again. Those types of things. So it doesn't seem
par for the course in the U.S. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't seem exactly patient-oriented. It does seem like we're going to keep control of things and make money on it as an organization, regardless of the point of view of individual doctors.
Right, and it's not just a matter of being rude or inconsiderate or something. People tend to think that, what's the difference? If people don't have access to this information, people are oftentimes requesting and being denied. That amounts to contributing to their ill health by not giving them the information that they need. This kind of corporatist policy is contributing to the deaths of people. There's an awful lot of areas in U.S. public policy where we see this. It's interesting to have these discussions because it's something that I don't know that they always use this term, but it's something that almost to a person, techno-optimists are concerned about, which is techno-sluggishness, and how to find the right balance, and in which industries to find the right balance between some deregulatory approach, some pro-business approach, and some more staunchly pro-citizen approach and public initiative approach. Do you have any? Tell us about some other balances there that you've struggled with or taken an interest in.
I think in regards to healthcare, I think having the ability to have imagery become part of public resource, as well as automated and robotic healthcare becoming part of the public resource, it subverts the usage of doctors in many cases, but it's actually providing healthcare. And if the healthcare industry is not going to provide healthcare, but provide long-term customers in opioid epidemics rather than curing things in the United States, then that's the way we need to go to keep it a legitimate industry. What else would you be getting onto?
Well, I wanted to say something of that. There's a protectionist sense, a kind of broad protectionist sense about wanting to make sure that doctors don't have their jobs automated out of existence. But the people who say that are missing an important point. You mentioned that the economics are such where something approaching 20% of the U.S. economy is in this field, but that number could actually be quite a bit larger. There's just in the way that we could have a jurisprudence system that is AI driven, that could be doing a lot more than it does and working a lot better than it does. This number should be a lot larger. So by getting the ball rolling with automation and not allowing some organization or interest to say, we need to slow this because we have a concern for this group of workers. But rather by getting that ball rolling, I think ultimately you have a better situation for those parties concerned. You have more jobs for those doctors, and I think that's pretty well in evidence in Estonia, which has been able to have public health outcomes more than commensurate with their per capita GDP, and considering the state that they were in 25 years ago, it's quite an accomplishment what they've done. But
are they like performance-based compensation for healthcare providers?
I believe that they have this to some degree. Their e-health portals, their e-governance portals for public health. They are. I don't know what sort of metrics they're using precisely off the top of my head, but I know that they do have those kind of standards in place. They're wanting to build this out more. That's their next step, because they've had a lot of success with blockchain voting and other blockchain things that are more staunchly, more decidedly in the technocracy vein. But this is an area where like all of us, we can be doing better with respect to taking care of ourselves and taking care of one another. And
it just froze up.
I was surprised that it came up in this talk, because I thought we were going to be talking principally about iVoting and some of these other particular measures. But I was pleasantly surprised because, as I said, it is, I think, the thing that brings techno-optimists together more than any other subject is better public health outcomes and life extension.
Yeah, and I think from the news I got anyway, Trump had made the right to try which gives
Yes.
people the right to do things that are not necessarily FDA approved.
Yes. That
so
is.
it's not necessarily the right to sell things that are not FDA approved, but it's the right to try things as a patient. That, to me, is a step in the right direction. It's a step towards freedom. It's a step towards the ability to self-evolve or the ability to heal rather than be a customer till death,
Yes.
depending on what the ailment may be.
And
So
I would
go ahead.
I would put that in the same class of a sort of thing where when there is that momentum that derives from that, when you have a lot of people who are willing to begin testing new medications and they have the freedom to do so, there are regulatory concerns with that. We should not brush those aside. But that momentum itself, it elevates the pace of techno progress in biomedicine, and that should be the thing that we want. I mean, it's I don't make any bones about it. I am a person who wants to live a preternaturally long lifespan. I intermittent fast and do what I can to do that, but a lot of that is not up to me. But it is up to these regulatory frameworks, and this right to try. In my view, it was one thing that's quite laudable on the part of this administration. But we could go a lot further with that. So that it's not just for people who are already in dire straits, so that people who are more interested in other interventions, short of end of life concerns, would be able to begin to do those as well. And that does introduce more fancy footwork regulation-wise, but I think there's a lot of ways that we could be pushing that as well.
Yeah, we're at the tip of the iceberg as far as what we're going to be able to do with the medium of DNA. I see. We're a couple generations away from being able to, completely program immune systems and things like that, which makes an interesting world. I think the ability to view things sustainably is what we're going to need to do in regards to procreation and things like that. And being able to, for example, have the land, water, and air have another life before creating that other life. That sort of thing. In regards to the responsible resources and longevity and sustainability. So yeah.
It's funny that we're discussing this, because I'm sitting across from my business partner and a podcast partner, Stace NG, and we did a talk about these near-term but more speculative or transgressive kinds of things. We talked about biobags, artificial wombs, and a couple of things like this. Like you were saying, there's an awful lot of things that are coming at us hot and fast because of techno progress. And we do always run the risk of some of those things sort of becoming orphan technologies to some degree, not being adapted by the marketplace, or not being people not being ready for those things. Zoltan Isfin just did a piece about these artificial wombs, and with respect to people's concerns about the regulation of fertility medicine and birth control, particularly abortion. I think it's an interesting thing. I've been pro-life for almost as pardon me. I've been pro-choice. I got to edit that for almost as long as I can remember, and but I would not be averse to working with an organization that was more socially conservative if the end was to be bringing this artificial womb technology or any new biomedicine to the fore, because this kind of thing, it's a big game changer. It's a big deal for techno-futurists. What do you see along those lines of this mad science stuff?
Of mad science stuff?
Well, yeah, or just I shouldn't say that, but the stuff, the more controversial stuff that is very, very real today.
I think late term abortions are not cool.
Hmm.
Early term, I'm not the one that's going to make that decision. I don't think that's a
Hmm.
government decision.
Hmm.
Um, I think if you're 8 months into it and the baby can survive, then it's murder. But
Hmm.
if it's if you're taking the day after pill, it's not, and that's
Hmm.
not my
That's
call.
very interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, as
And
far as like usage of embryos for stem cells, I think placental stem cell and umbilical cord stem cells should be preserved for that person as a form of healthcare. Uh,
yes, we
such
could
as
regard that as a human right.
yeah, I think that's healthcare. That's future healthcare. Like if I had a kid
Hmm.
right now, I would cryogenically freeze a placenta.
Hmm.
I think the ability to use placental stem cells, to donate them and to use them, is perfectly moral and perfectly fine. You're not killing a baby to do that.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a major disruption in people's heads in regards to how the science is actually conducted and where stem cells come from and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
There's,
so
I think,
that's where
to
I
my
see.
mind, the main takeaway. Hmm.
Go ahead.
To my mind, the main takeaway is that we could already have moved beyond this discussion of pro life versus pro choice. Had we invested in advancing fertility medicine. But I almost view the abortion debate as it's framed in the United States as a very arbitrary line in the sand. That doesn't actually have that much to do with the moralism that people, the moralistic terms that people describe it in, but rather it's trying to preempt moving into this world of biobags. They don't want this to go so far, social conservatives. So they have this early a line in the sand with abortion, and all of the debate is clustered around that. But we could have easily circumvented that, in my view, by having a different kind of funding of fertility medicine and different kind of political will and public consensus around fertility medicine. And that itself, having the foresight to have done that, would have advanced all manner of related public health outcomes. But that's a little bit maybe a black pill kind of talk.
Yeah, I think the ability to use expanded stem cell without considering it to be a drug,
Mm,
meaning if I took bone marrow, got stem cell out of my own body, if we divide the cells, the FDA currently considers that to be a new drug,
mm,
even though they're my own cells going back into my own body.
mm,
So using legal metrics like the right to try in the United States could circumvent that kind of regulatory holdup, where
mm,
it's legitimate use of things. Um,
mm.
in regards to,
So there's
like, for example, I think the ability to stem cell 3D print organs such as kidneys and hearts, I
mm,
believe that to be a much better direction than paying 1% of the federal budget for continued dialysis.
mm,
For many patients, I also believe it to be a 3D stem cell printing organs to be a better solution than what's happening in China right now with basically having human organs grown in pigs that can then be slaughtered, and then you use that organ in a human.
mm.
Uh, so, is that bacon cannibalism?
Yeah.
Is that the would it be better to 3D print it? My personal
Mm,
belief is a life worth living or none at all.
mm,
And that goes for what I eat as
mm,
well as myself.
mm,
And I think that's a fairly gravity-like core
Mm.
for being able to respect life.
Mm. It,
And
and it bears repeating because even from the economic side, these moral concerns are very real. Not having that level of automation and that level of prevention that you're talking about in these systems, having concerns with basically triage, the dialysis, but basically hospice care, rather than finding solutions and detections at an earlier stage. That expenditure represents many thousands of people who could have otherwise been using those health resources as well. So it's worthwhile to be making this point. And we don't, of course, want to be um, uh, uh, doing anything to harm those people who do need those services in the meantime, but we have to be doing all of those things. And you're talking a little bit about stem cells as a service in recent months, going back, I think just only about a year, where you can have a stem cell extraction from bone marrow in your hip, and that will be banked for you, and it's not cheap, and it's only recommended for people of a certain age. Some of these kinds of services, it's really better, as you said, to have that from a baby. At the same time, there's
of the eventual usage of the cell is going to be, yeah.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, it seems that there's breakthroughs occurring that might allow us to be using any sort of sample to recreate those cells, and maybe that's only a few years away. So, what do you say to people?
Cells into the ability to degenerate skin cells into an earlier state and then make them into a lot of different kinds of cell totally exists.
Yes.
So yeah, as far as being able to put in a different type of DNA strand and completely program the development of the cell, I mean, as we're getting into the world of building those microbiological machines that dictate the growth of those things, that's where the cutting edge is. And in a generation or two, that I think is going to be, I don't think we're going to turn into shapeshifters out of nowhere, but as far as being able to evolve, I think that the possibility is coming.
I think if we had that crystal ball and we could see what this landscape looks like in 15 years, we would both be quite pleasantly surprised. We might not be able to predict in which arena that would be most advanced in any real way, but I do agree. That shapeshifter analogy on some dimension or another might not be so far off the mark. It's funny we're talking about some technocratic notions because one of the leaders of the technocracy party is just calling me. We had been trying to set up something. I'm not going to take that call, but we were talking quite a bit about various ideas around technocracy and 21st century technocracy notions, and now one of those guys just called me.
It's serendipity sometimes. It's a wonderful church to be part of.
Yeah. It's an interesting organization because they go back quite a ways to the early 1920s, and they were sort of at their height of strength leading up to the implementation of the original New Deal. So they kind of lost their power base in 1935 as other competing economic reform measures kind of supplanted them. But so I'm looking forward to talking about that with him. I like his historical stuff too. So these kind of services, I don't have $20,000 to spend on all of these various services for tissue banking and so forth. Should I be concerned? It would save me money in the long run, perhaps, if I could get that money together. Or should I trust that some of those things, like we mentioned, the ability to turn other cells into those, is going to come in a timely fashion?
Yeah, I think one of the I actually had a I called it the personal arc, which is a like a thermos for liquid nitrogen vapor. So you could have a cell at like -120, -130. When you get
Mm,
colder than that, like straight liquid nitrogen,
mm,
it cracks the cell, like how an ice cube is white, not clear. So you get micro fractures, so things don't last. So you want a liquid nitrogen vapor, but to do a thermos with liquid nitrogen vapor and be able to put your own samples in there, blood, semen, stem cell from your cheek swab, that internal skin, uh, that sort of thing, and be able to preserve, the youngest cell that you can get of you. That's, the least manipulate, the thing that you would have to manipulate least.
mm.
So
And,
I think that's, maybe a DIY hack at doing it. Um,
mm,
my 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 personal belief is that for sustained peaceful immortality to come from mortals, immortality would need to be a gift.
mm.
We're
Believe
in the
that's true.
West. We're in the, well, do you have the money? Are you powerful enough to do that?
Mm,
How is
yeah.
that an accurate moral filtration? You know,
Mm,
how
that,
does that set an eternal landscape?
yeah. It
So
sets up a lot of
able
potential conflicts or at least microaggressions.
Yeah, so I think that as we look at some of the the formations of political parties, for example, and the whether it's uh, truly contributing to things or is it a circle jerk, uh,
Mm.
those types of
Well,
things, to be able to figure out what are the values and what do we want to be able to sustain.
mm. My main competitor in this race, her name is Rachel Haywire, and she's a lovely person. I don't consider her to be a serious-minded political philosopher, but in the debate, she brought up an issue of public funds for cryonics, and I support cryonics wholeheartedly. But I said, there's an awful lot of things that we could be doing that would better propel some longevity escape velocity than public funds for cryonics. And I would really want to be earmarking those funds for broader life extension initiatives that would have bigger payoffs for the people involved. Because we do have to concern ourselves with this. If we have an underclass that is not having access to the care they need, and we have an overclass that has access to force multipliers like Neuralace and is effectively immortal, that creates potential dystopian scenarios that might sound like something out of the movies, but we've seen conflicts of this kind in history time and again. And we're not immune to it just because we live in the networked world now.
Yeah, I mean, it sparked my mind to say, who would ever actually be motivated to get on a starship and go explore?
Mm, mm,
If you
yeah.
run your time out, the clock runs out here as an immortal, maybe those are actual options. But yeah, I
Mm,
think it is what's sustainable here, and how we develop what should stay
mm.
is maybe a little far fetched future, but something
Well,
that definitely possible.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, public medical is going to go for functionality,
Mm,
right? It means you're
yeah.
not a disabled person that's costing the other public dollars. Uh,
Right. Right.
Functionality. It's not necessarily saying, oh, you were born here, so now you get immortality because we said so. I think that's much more of a personal choice, and
Mm,
it's also
mm,
something that is not just a choice, but something that, in the long term, for sustainable peace, would need to be something that comes through some form of gift. Life
mm,
is a gift. It's not just a struggle for power otherwise.
mm. Yes, yes. Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a life extensionist. He writes about this sort of thing, but he's also somebody who's I don't drink alcohol. I'd like to stop drinking coffee too, I kind of do some of these things. I stopped smoking some years ago when I started to take even a passing interest in this sort of thing. But my friend, he's still smoking and been drinking a pretty stiff drink once or thrice a day. And I said, well, are you concerned that this is
But
affecting your? Go ahead. Sorry.
the ability to hit an alcohol reset for your gut microbiome is an interesting tool, but I don't believe being an alcoholic is necessarily trying for life extension. But
You
yeah,
don't think it's a disqualifier to these lifestyle factors that it's but what about I mean, we don't know what the life extension timeline is. It's better to err on the side of caution and hopefully have those 50 years to make preparations.
yeah. I mean, I don't think that the experience of life should disqualify a person from prolonging it.
Mm,
Uh,
I feel that way about the politics of it too. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
the ability to have, rather than cookie cutter laws, things that are actually relevant to the individual. We're all growing and learning on our own paths, coming from all kinds of different environments, all kinds of different things. But if you say, well, if you have a beer now, you don't get this, is going to be a different challenge for different people, and it might be
yeah,
something completely innocent to the question and answer of.
yeah.
So as far as being able to have things be relevant to the individual and to grow in such a way, at this point is a major privacy issue as far as actually implementing an AI to do that and have human control on it, besides our own blood and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
I'm actually open to things in the nootropics or even, techno hedonism kind of things far beyond just having a beer or a cigarette, experientially in the longer term. And so I shouldn't, I hope I didn't come off as sounding like a sort of after school special on that. But it's just an area that a lot of people are kind of evaluating in the transhumanist party. An awful lot of people have been quite careful about their health for some years, and it's lifestyle features are a part of this podcast and a part of all of these discussions. But yeah, there's never a point, I think, in starting to make value judgments about that. People were making value judgments about the other competitor in my race, Charles Holsopple, having been not terribly familiar with life extension concepts before a few months ago. And, I say, so far as in the broadest sense, I believe that people are de facto life extensionists. 98% of people, I believe, are going to be accepting these interventions as they become available to them, particularly if they're provided through their public health service or at a reasonable price point. I don't have some moral authority to say that somebody isn't a good transhumanist or something.
Yeah,
But
I don't know how to respond to that either.
sorry, I'm talking a bit about these guys, and that's not the most germane thing. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. You have so many insights into areas of interest to me: technocracy, economics, emerging biomedicine, and I hope we get a chance to meet in real life someday.
Yeah, I'm totally open to it. That would be awesome. Yeah.
Is there anything else that we want to kick around with respect to your campaign? Let's lay it out for people and give them big picture.
The campaign has not begun yet, so
Okay.
I'm figuring out as a realistic route, or if it's not an actual realistic route, if it's a media campaign that would be effective, and if I have the ability to invest my time and money into doing so. So that's the nitty gritty of going into public service. So I'm basically better solution on automation than any of the presidential candidates or either party is putting out. It's been better since 2012. So it is now timely to do so. So it's a good time for me to be able to do it. I believe also it's timely to, before we spend massive amounts of money and have negative neighborly relations with Mexico in regards to a glorified fence, we can have a smart wall that's actually a shipping route from Pacific to Atlantic that's going to take out a huge carbon footprint and perform better than existing technologies, while being a wall. It's not just a wall. It's actually something we share with our neighbors as a shipping route. I think that turns a negative into a positive. So I'm going for that. I'm interested, and I'm not sure of the politics or my voicing of yet, but I'm interested in potentially using distributed ledger in the ability to be sure to count all of the votes correctly, and having a secondary measure to counting the ballot, so as to be able to double check essentially. So yeah, well, you alluded to that as a topic. I'm not sure in regards to being able to make it through a primary into a general election, those types of things, or count those votes. If that's something I want to have as a means. But I will put forth the automation proposal of every citizen having the right to an equal share of the automated labor force, an equal vote for what it does or does not perform, and a fair share of what's produced, which is step one being the formation of a Department of Automated Labor, kind of like the DMV for cars, but for robots and automation systems. And I think that get cross-party platform ability, as well as the vacuum train on the board.
I like all of that, and I just want to say that the equitable distribution in terms of automation, it is in some sense that inequitable distribution is the story of the 20th century and early 21st century, and it's the thing that we most need to address in the deterioration of our middle class, and in some ways in the deterioration of our civil society. And this full automation framework that you describe and work towards, and the human development that derives from that, it's a thing worth fighting for. There's life extension outcomes, this ultimately leading to a longevity, escape velocity, and the actual implementations of that, not lip service, but the actual policy initiatives and technologies positioned properly that advance that. It's a thing worth fighting for. And I want to say you are the very, very best of us, sir. Thank you for doing this with me. I hope that we get a chance to meet. I hope I can do, we say of the Transhumanist Party that we're small, but we have a certain kind of profile and influence. And even relative to that, I hope what little I can offer, I would offer it wholeheartedly and fully to you in service of this campaign, because I haven't seen better ideas than what I've seen from you.
Thank you so much, Ben. Yeah, I would love to meet you in person and give you a big hug.